Okay, we'll start with this. Unbeaten up-and-comer Carolyn Dubois wants a Katie Taylor fight, but knows there's a million people ahead of her. And it is true, they're on very different career paths. Carolyn is in the beginning stages of her career, whereas Katie is nearing towards the end. Carolyn Dubois would love a shot at Katie Taylor, but says there's a million people ahead of her in the queue to face the undisputed lightweight champion. The 21-year-old will aim to take her professional record to 5-0 when she faces Sofia Alejandra Rodriguez on December 17th in Bournemouth before targeting much bigger fights in 2022. I don't doubt for a second that Carolyn, the amateur standout and former Olympian, would love to share the ring with Katie, but there are a number of reasons why a fight between them likely won't materialize. As stated, they're in very different places in their careers here and now. Carolyn is still in the beginning stages of her career, whereas Katie is approaching the end. And then there are the politics of boxing to also consider, that Carolyn Dubois boxes on the Sky Sports Boxer side of things, whereas Katie's promoted by Matchroom and fights on DAZN. Dubois is comfortable fighting at 130, 135, or 140 pounds, and Mikaela Mayer is one of a number of options for the youngster next year, which is a fight that could see the winner go on to challenge for Taylor's lightweight belts. Mikaela Mayer versus Carolyn Dubois, that's some idea, that's some fight. I would very much like to see a fight like that in the coming year, though I'm not sure that Carolyn is quite there yet, ready for such a fight, though I don't think it will take her very long. The network relationship exists between Top Rank, who promotes Mikaela Mayer, and Sky Sports, where Carolyn Dubois boxes under the Boxer banner. And lest we forget, it was Boxer who staged the Shields versus Marshall fight, where Mikaela Mayer boxed on the co-main event to the main event opposite the ring Alicia Baumgartner. The relationship exists between Mikaela, Boxer, Sky Sports, and Top Rank that could see such a fight come into fruition. But as far as Carolyn and Katie, Dubois, who is 15 years younger than the brave Bomac, isn't confident that she'll ever get to share the ring with the 2012 Olympic champion. She told Sky Sports, "I don't know if that's going to happen. There's a million people ahead of me, but if there's a chance that I can get in contention and be the one to be there, I'll be there. I'll be ready," Dubois said. Mayer versus Dubois is a lot more likely to take place than Taylor versus Dubois. I'm sure that young Carolyn is just as receptive to a potential Mikaela Mayer fight as she would be to a Katie Taylor fight. The real question is, how receptive would Mikaela be to such a match? She is open to that as Carolyn is. Mikaela Mayer is yet another fighter that is in the more advanced stages of her career than young Carolyn is, so I don't think that Mikaela's courting retirement. Of course not. But she's definitely further along than Carolyn. I think that goes without saying. I always say I want to be remembered as a great fighter. Not just a great female fighter, but a great fighter in general. And I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing those steps coming into play where people are getting respected just for being good fighters, and I can't wait to be one of those. I think Carolyn Dubois is the genuine article. I think Carolyn Dubois is the heir apparent to the lightweight division in all the same way as I think that Beatriz Ferreira is the heir apparent to the super featherweight division. Beatriz Ferreira, Olympic amateur standout of Brazil, recent Matchroom signee who has boxed two times so far. 2 times under the Matchroom banner, 2 times as a professional boxer since having turned pro. And Ferreira versus Dubois as a fight. Ferreira versus Dubois seems more likely to me than Taylor versus Dubois, or Taylor versus Ferreira for that matter. Meanwhile, Eddie Hearn revealed last month that Matchroom are closing in on a deal to secure Taylor her dream Croke Park fight in 2023. The promoter said, "Katie Taylor at Croke Park, basically, we're all over it. It's the only thing we want to do. We're negotiating at the moment with Most Valuable Promotions, who promotes Amandia Serrano. We're closing in on a deal." And that's where Katie Taylor is in her career. She's already fought the Lions, the Tigers, and the Bears. The only sensible fights for Katie Taylor are fights with the likes of a Amanda Serrano or a Chantel Cameron. Those fighters of that ilk, proven fighters. Whereas Carolyn's still making her bones as a professional.
Amanda's widely regarded as one of the best boxers in the world.
Even if she did lose the first fight to Katie Taylor, she didn't make it easy. Amanda Serrano could fight for undisputed at featherweight opposite the ring Erica Cruz in early February. We want to make it happen. Croke Park. We're doing everything we can, and I think we'll make it happen.
Yeah, Taylor versus Serrano too is a conversation. Taylor versus Cameron, certainly more than Taylor versus Dubois.
As far as Carolyn Dubois, I think Carolyn will go on to become one of the more dominant fighters at or around these weights, if not the most dominant fighter. It's really between her and Brazil's own Beatriz Ferreira.
Carolyn at 135 and Beatriz at 130.
They both jointly represent the next wave of fighter, the next generation of unbeaten up-and-comers that will dominate the sport after all the familiar faces have eventually been phased out.
I could see Beatriz dominating the super featherweight division long after Alicia and all the other fighters have moved up in weight. I could see Carolyn Dubois dominating lightweight well after Katie Taylor is retired.
You ask me what the next super fight might be. Comes to the next generation of fighters. It's Dubois versus Ferreira more than it's Dubois versus Taylor. In men's junior middleweight news, it has been officially announced that Jermell Charlo, reigning undisputed junior middleweight champion, will be sharing the ring with unbeaten up-and-comer of Australia, Tszyu, January 28th.
Does Tszyu really stand a chance here?
Listen,
Look,
in a junior middleweight division without a Jermell Charlo in it, in the absence of a Jermell Charlo, I would give Tszyu very good odds to see himself become a champion, even a unified champion. That's in the absence of a Jermell Charlo, but that's not reality. The reality of it is Jermell is the man to beat at 154 pounds. He's still there,
and all roads lead to him.
there's no getting around that. Until such a time as Jermell Charlo decides to move up in weight from junior middleweight up to middleweight, if you want an alphabet title, if you want to see yourself become a champion, you have to go through him. And that's what Tszyu wants to do.
There's no getting around that.
Tszyu doesn't want to get around Jermell Charlo. He wants to go through him. The question is, can he?
Both men only saw action once this entire calendar year. Jermell Charlo had the rematch with Brian Castano for what was the undisputed junior middleweight championship, and Tszyu made his U.S. debut opposite the ring.
Terrell Gachet. That was up there in Minneapolis at the Armory.
He suffered an early scare, an early knockdown into that fight. Walked into a punch and was sat on his back pocket. Got himself up off the canvas and went on to dominate the fight, dominate Terrell Gachet.
That early knockdown, that early scare, serves as an indicator that Tszyu is very much still green. He's still making his bones as a professional, and while he showed real heart and real grit, getting up off the canvas and going on to dominate the fight,
I don't think he's ready for this.
it's smart on Jermell Charlo's part, it is, to take care of this guy sooner rather than later, instead of putting it off and letting that guy go on and fight somebody else, get more rounds in the bank, garner more professional experience.
No, he's fighting him next.
It's intelligent, it's intuitive to take care of this guy and take care of him sooner rather than later, because later on he might be a better fighter than he is right now, at least a more experienced one.
Both Tim and Jermell, they're both punchers, but one is a lot more experienced than the other. Tszyu's base style lives somewhere in between the boxer-puncher and the pressure fighter.
Though more often than not, he is that mid-range to inside aggressive pressure fighter. Bit of good body puncher as well. Opposite the ring, Jermell Charlo, what normally works for Tim may backfire.
You don't want to get too aggressive with Jermell Charlo. Stay in the pocket with him too long, stand in front of him.
Open up in front of him that much, because while Tszyu can punch, so can Jermell Charlo.
Not a lot he hasn't seen at 154 pounds.
Think you're the first unbeaten up-and-comer that came knocking at his door, looking to take what he's got? Ask Erickson Lubin.
Ask how it worked out for him.
Tszyu really is more pressure fighter than boxer-puncher, and as far as boxer-punchers go, well, that would be Jermell in this situation. The dichotomy of this matchup, the dynamic in that.
Boxer punch has got a stylistic advantage over a pressure fighter.
It's usually how that goes. Tack on a few subtleties and nuances, some physical characteristics. The fact that Jermell Charlo, he can punch. He's got power.
He's got a height advantage, a reach advantage, and he can punch.
He's experienced.
The odds really are stacked against young Tszyu, who's grabbing the bull by the horns. And
I can't stress this enough. Tszyu already possessed the kind of domestic marquee value that he didn't need to fast-track himself to an alphabet titles this soon. Tszyu doesn't actually need this fight here and now to make good money, very good money, in the land down under. In Australia, he can pack a crowd whilst garnering the necessary experiences that he needs as a fighter. He is choosing to take on Charlo.
In terms of contrast and retrospect, Tszyu is more well known in his neck of the woods than Charlo is in his. That's the kind of marquee value that Tim has.
In part because of his namesake, being the son of the legendary Tszyu, and the fact that Tim's career
in 2020, the year that the pandemic hit and most of the world was in lockdown, Tszyu was down there in Australia fighting in front of large crowds, very large crowds, 10,000, 14,000.
The Jeff Horn fight, the Stevie Sparks fight, the Bowen Morgan fight, the Takeshi Inui fight.
No Limit Promotions has done a fantastic job promoting Tszyu's fights. So much so that he doesn't actually need this right now. He wants this.
So I'd be lying to you if I told you that I were confident in Tszyu's chances opposite the ring, the best junior middleweight in the world, bar none.
Pound for pound alum and undisputed Ring Magazine lineal champion Charlo. I think he's too experienced for Tim.
Oh, it's not the end of the world if Tim loses. He can bounce back. He can rebound. But there is a very good chance that things go sideways for him January 28th, late next month, when these two are supposed to lock horns.
It's too soon.
But the fight is on. And on January 28th, opposite the ring, Charlo, we're going to find out what Tszyu is really made of. In men's welterweight news, ahead of his upcoming title defense opposite the ring, David Avanesian this weekend, Terence Crawford says Thurman was never serious about fighting him. We don't believe you, Keith.
There are 2 years in between the Pacquiao loss and the Mario Barrios win. At any point in between there, if Keith wanted the fight with Terence, the opportunity was right there.
Listen, man. Everybody knows Keith Thurman is just talking. You know, you gotta understand, Keith Thurman was the same guy that said, I'm not a real welterweight. Keith Thurman is the same guy that said, I haven't really proven myself at welterweight. Keith Thurman is the same guy that expressed himself, you know, as not being interested in fighting Terence Crawford. So now all of a sudden, out of the blue, he's fiending to fight Terence Crawford. Okay.
Thurman indicated earlier this year that he was all for stepping in to fight either WBA, IBF, WBC champion Errol Spence Jr. or Crawford if the two failed to reach a deal.
Keith Thurman's been bouncing that idea around as far back as 2020, the year the pandemic hit, the year the pandemic started. And at any point in between, the Pacquiao loss on the Barrios win, if he really wanted to get Terence Crawford in the ring, the opportunity was there. He would have, because he could have, but he didn't.
Because he didn't want to. He wasn't serious.
See, the thing is, when you're not relevant, you know what I mean? You take shots at the guys that are relevant, Crawford continued. That's what Keith Thurman is doing right now. He's fiending to fight me. He's fiending to fight Errol Spence when he clearly ducked Errol Spence for how many years? When he clearly didn't want to get in the ring with Errol Spence. When he clearly tried to shade Terence Crawford off at fighting at the welterweight division. Now all of a sudden, you're out here naked in the streets and you want to fight everybody. Come on, man. We don't believe you, Keith. We don't believe you.
I never have, because it's not an either-or situation. You never had to choose between fighting Errol and Terence. If you wanted to fight them both, you could have. You had plenty of time.
It's not an either-or situation. It's only an either-or situation if you don't like your chances. If you figure, I'm not going to fight Terence straight away because if I do, I may not make it to the Errol Spence Jr. fight. And that's the way the situation was treated.
Proliferation of interviews the last 2 years filled with hollow words.
Here at year's end, is anybody really surprised that Keith never got around to fighting Terence and is instead being fast-tracked to Errol?
You surprised?
Hey, Terence knew he can beat him, so that's why he said, fuck it. Let's go then.
I guess, I don't know, if it's not normal, like, why would there not be, like, a guarantee? I think that's, like, the big question a lot of fans have.
Right. I don't know, man. I don't know where they come up with this logic at, not guaranteeing Terence. You're going to guarantee everybody else, but you won't guarantee Terence. That to me is a tactic to have the card stacked against him, you know. And then once he said, yeah, okay, all right, let's go, then they got nervous about it.
Do you think ultimately, and I think I already know the answer, but do you feel that they're not confident that Errol can get the win, and because he's a big star for them, that's like a big hit for them?
Right. Well, they know it. They know it. They know what Errol can't beat Bud, just because of some of the things that he might do inside the ring or even outside the ring. And the way Bud carries himself and how he's been looking since he came to 47, stopping everybody. So Spence just be another person.
That is Brian Bomac McIntyre, manager and trainer of Terrence Crawford, echoing the sentiments I've expressed many times here on this channel. The offer made to Terrence was not a good faith offer made in the interests of making the fight a reality. You conjure up guarantees for every other fighter that shared the ring with Errol Spence Jr., but this one.
Except now, it's not just me, the content creator, saying it anymore. It's Terrence Crawford saying it. It's Brian Bomac McIntyre saying it.
Tim Smith starts the year off saying they're not confident this fight will be a moneymaker. Tim Smith, the VP of Communications at the PBC, kicks off this year that we're still in, saying he thinks people are just going to steal this fight. You're wondering why they didn't make Terrence Crawford a cash guarantee.
You've convinced yourself it's Terrence Crawford's fault the fight didn't happen when the onus to do it is on Al Heyman. The onus to do it is on the PBC.
The same PBC that had all this money to offer Canelo Alvarez, the same PBC that even had money to offer Jaime Munguia to bring him over for a Jermall Charlo fight. They had money for those guys, no money for Terrence.
I'm not telling you have to offer this guy the same kind of money you offered Canelo.
Of course not, because he's not the same draw that Canelo Alvarez is. But at the same time, it shows when you need to go in the well to try and make something happen, you can. Just in this instance, you didn't want to.
You never did, because you never wanted to make this fight.
So what's the argument now? That Terrence and Bomac, Brian McIntyre, the aforementioned parties, the involved parties, they don't know what they're talking about, but you do?
No, I know. They're lying. We're not supposed to believe anything they say, but we're supposed to believe everything that comes from the PBC side of things.
Everything that Errol says. Errol, who wanted to be fast-tracked to a Jeff Horn fight straight away, but he didn't keep that same energy for Terrence. It became about sides of the street with Terrence.
Do you remember that?
Because I do. For the last 4 going on 5 years, I've seen every obstacle and every excuse in the book come from the same side.
They tell you it's about sides of the street, while that same PBC negotiates with that same top rank to do a Wilder versus Fury rematch. But they tell you, when it comes to Terrence and Errol, that's about sides of the street.
They want Al Heyman to be more than what he actually is, when all he is a guy who's protecting his investment at all costs.